and welcome fellow bookworms and film fans. Welcome to this week's book to film adaptation of Les Mis. Now, I'm just going to say this right off the bat. Anyone that knows me knows my pronunciations in English is not great. My pronunciations in French are going to be so much worse. So, considering that this book is French, set in France, it was originally written in French to be translated into English, there might be some words that I stumble on. There might be some words that I don't say correctly. Please bear with me. Please be nice. Because God knows I'm going to be as tougher on myself anyway. So anyway, Les Mis was, I'm not going to even try and say the full title, was written by Victor Hugo. It was published in 1862 originally. It was then adapted to screens several times over the years, but I should be looking at the 2012 musical version. Obviously, it is also a stage, a musical production on stage as well, which I will hopefully see one day. I know I keep saying that for a lot of the book to film adaptations that I do, but I will eventually see it. I cannot wait. So obviously we'll be looking at three things. We'll be looking at how good is the book, how good is the film, and how good does the plot take from the book. Now, obviously there are spoilers within this episode, so please just bear that in mind. So the film, as I said, to see this live on stage will just be phenomenal. So this musical rendition of Les Mis is just phenomenal. Honestly, just like to see it, like, just even on film, the fact that the director had the cast sing live while filming, you can see the rawness, you can see the emotion, and you can see the effort that they're putting in, and it's just so good. Like, honestly, like, it brings chills. It is a bit of a longer film. It's sort of around the 3-hour mark. So if you are the kind of person that can't sit down for a 3-hour film, that's fine. Chop it in 2 halves. Have up to the point where Jean Valjean escapes and gets Cosette. Have that sort of like as your first half, and then from Cosette being an adult onwards as your second half, it splits almost perfectly in 2. It is amazingly cast. The story is dealt with so well, and it is aged so well as well. Considering that this book was written in the 1800s, it has aged so well, and there's still a lot of the plot points that are basically relevant today. The fact that if someone can't work, they end up on a downward spiral. If they can't get the help that they need, they end up in poverty. They can't get out of the poverty. And it's just the rich stay rich and the poor stay poor, and it's about bridging the gap, and a lot of it is still relevant. And obviously I'm not preaching politics. I do not do politics on this channel, but what I'm saying is a lot of the points you look at and you go, I can see how this book can still be written in today's society. I mean, I normally am not very good with keeping attention for 3 hours, but I didn't notice the time pass in this film. I didn't. I wasn't checking my watch. I wasn't checking my phone. It had my full attention, and it was just beautiful. It was great as well to see Javert and Jean Valjean having the sort of cat and mouse game throughout the film, and having that as like a way to bridge between the time, from when he was in prison to when he got, let down and everything like that, and let out of prison, and then, they keep bumping into each other, and it's just seeing their interactions throughout the film is how it pulls everything together, and it was just so good to watch and so enjoyable. And I love as well that because of this Javert, Jean Valjean sort of like entwining, you see how it affects the lives of those around them as well. So, you come across Fontaine and Cosette, and I'm going to call them the innkeepers because I'm telling you now, I will not be able to pronounce their name. I see it written down. I've heard it on the film. I just can't say it. So in the film, they're played by Sacha Baron Cohen and Helen Bow Carter. And again, I've butchered her name. I'm sorry. But so good. Like, honestly, they play detestable characters, but they do it so well. And it's just great seeing all of this portrayed. So honestly, it's the fact as well that all of this happens, this entire plot happens, because Jean Valjean stole a loaf of bread. Perfect. Absolutely perfect. You can't go wrong. So it gets a 9 out of 10. The film does for me. 100% gets a 9 out of 10. So the book is interesting. The main story is so good. It's riveting. I feel in, like, honestly, for the characters, I feel invested in what's going on. And I'm like, right, okay, I need this to happen. I need to know what happens. I need to know that they're okay. And I every step of the way, I'm like, oh, so this is what's going to happen with this person. And it's, you know, it has me at hello, basically, with the characters and the main story. I love the coincidence and how everybody interacts with everybody, and how, you know, this character is actually this character's, like, savior, and purely by chance. And it's, you know, and it's always, and it's so perfect with Valjean as a convict, and yet he's almost a saintly man because of a chance encounter with a really great priest, basically. And he's got such a clear thing of right and wrong, and you get this clear right and wrong in Javert as well, but he takes it a step too far, and he doesn't think people can change. But Jean Valjean, who's changed, knows that, you know, you're not always a convict. There is one small issue, like tiny issue, that I had reading this book, and that is the many, many, many interludes. So many interludes. There was like the whole history of the Battle of Waterloo for literally the sake of introducing one character right at the very end. You know, there was at one point the whole history of the Paris sewage system. Of course, that's relevant for one little point. So I felt like if you cut out the interludes that weren't really needed, it would be a lot smaller book. I mean, it's about over 1,000 pages long anyway. But what I love as well is this final edition of like 1,200 odd pages was actually edited, and it almost caused an actual duel to the death between the editor and Victor Hugo, as the editor wanted to get rid of more pages, but Victor Hugo thought it would take away from the story. Like, how fun of a fact is that? So the book gets a 6 out of 10 from me. It would be higher, but I genuinely was bored to death at points of reading about the Paris sewage system. It's as simple as that. Like, there's a lot of interludes in there where I almost could have just skipped it and it would have had no outcome on what happened. As you will find out when I tell you in the plot of the lovely interludes and when each one happens. So the plot. So the film starts with Jean Valjean working out his time in prison under the eye of Javert, but then being released on parole and trying to find work. The book starts by following the life of Monsieur Muriel. He starts as an owner of land. He leaves during one of the revolutions, and when he comes back, he becomes the Bishop of... I'm going to spell it Digne. So through his charity and loving ways, he becomes known as Bienvenue, which means welcome, I think, in French. So I know I've butchered that. So I'm just going to call him Bishop Muriel. And I'm pretty sure I'm saying that wrong. So in both, Jean Valjean ends up in this little town where Bishop Muriel is located. After being turned away from lodging from everywhere, from all the inns and everything, Jean Valjean gets accepted into the hospitality of the bishop. So we find out that Valjean was imprisoned for simply stealing a loaf of bread, and because of that, he lost 19 years of his life. Okay. In the book, we get a bit more of his youth and a bit more of his imprisonment as well. And we find out the reason he lost 19 years of his life in the book is because he keeps trying to escape getting caught and then ending up with more time. In both, however, Valjean steals the silver from the bishop. He gets caught and taken back to the bishop, who's known for his kindness, says, he gave the silver as a gift to Valjean. And make sure that Valjean goes on to do better things and to be a better person. So in the film, it's kind of like a little kind of, Valjean goes, oh, right, okay, I need to be a better person. In the book, we see a lot more of the struggle with him as he tries to decide who to become, because he's become so hated, like he hates people because of his 19 years for a loaf of bread. So, you know, it's just a case of he needs to figure out, is he going to be a nicer person? So then we see him become, with his new identity, and a successful pillar of society. Now in the book, we get a whole chapter about what happened in 1817. It has no bearing on the book or the film. In the book, however, we do learn of the history of Fantine and how she comes to fall pregnant. In the film, we just learn that she has a child that she's caring for. And she's working in Valjean's workshop, although now he's going by Monsieur le Maire, which just basically means the mayor of the town. So in the book, we read how Fantine had to leave Cosette with the innkeepers and learn rather quickly that they're not kind people at all. Like, we learn that so quickly. And in the film, we meet the innkeepers a lot later on, because obviously the book, we see her pregnant, her give up the child to the innkeepers and have to survive. In the film, we don't see the innkeepers until, unfortunately, Fantine passes away. And we get more information as well as to how Monsieur le Maire ends up becoming so rich. And we also hear about in the book as well the passing of the bishop. So all of that we get in the book. We don't really see that in the film. In both, however, despite building a new life, Javert comes into it and regards Monsieur le Maire with suspicion, because he knows that he recalls his face from somewhere, but he can't figure out where. But when a cart falls and traps someone, Monsieur le Maire lifts it in front of Javert, and Javert at that point goes, "You're Valjean, I know you." And they're still hunting for him because he's not gone back on parole. He's, you know. So this kind of cements it in Javert's mind that this is Valjean. Now in both, once Fantine is found to have a child, she's dismissed from the workshop and has become destitute. And through having to send money to the innkeepers to look after Cosette, who we find out they're not actually using it to look after Cosette, she cuts off her hair, she loses her teeth, and then unfortunately she becomes a woman of the night. And one night, this is in both, she assaults a man who's trying to take advantage, and she doesn't really want it. And because of that, she gets cornered by Javert and pretty much almost arrested. But in both, Monsieur le Maire comes to her rescue and assures her that she will once again be with her child Cosette and looks after her. Now, Fantine ends up in hospital as she's very weak and ill, but in the book, she's arrested first and then sort of released, but in the film, it's just straight away to the hospital. In the meantime, in both, Javert has sent off a letter to prove that Monsieur le Maire is Valjean, but gets back a letter saying it can't be because they've caught Valjean. So he throws himself at Monsieur le Maire's mercy, and because obviously we know Monsieur le Maire and Valjean are the same person, it leads us to questions as to who is this person that they think is Valjean. So this leaves Monsieur le Maire in a conundrum as to what to do, because he knows that if he leaves, there's loads of people that are going to lose out because of him. But if he doesn't, an innocent man is going to jail for particularly the rest of his life when it's not, that this person's not Valjean. So he decides at this point, so he forgives Javert and he says, "You're fine, you're absolutely fine." But then he decides that he's going to go to the magistrate and tell them that they have the wrong man. It does take him a while to get to that thought in the book. In the film, again, it's a lot quicker. So in the book, he goes off and, in both, he goes off and tells the court that he is in fact Valjean. The man they have arrested is set free, and somehow he manages to slip back to his life. Again, in the book, we get a lot more of this build-up and this big reveal. But he then goes back to Fantine because in both she is deteriorating and fast. So when he goes back to Fantine, Fantine is talking about Cosette and how, she's going to be with me soon. Javert turns up and tries to bring Valjean in, knowing that he is now Valjean and that he wasn't wrong. This confrontation, unfortunately, causes Fantine to pass on from this world. So she is now dead. Valjean, however, fights and escapes so he can get Cosette like he promised Fantine in the film. But he escapes holding after being arrested, and then goes off to get Cosette, however, is recaptured and sentenced to life in the book. So in the book, we get a nice little interlude about the Battle of Waterloo, and it's a very in-depth account of the Battle of Waterloo. We don't need it. We also get quite a few chapters about the ship Orion, but this is all because Valjean is now working on the ship Orion. He saves the fisherman's life, and then he kind of dives off and they think he's dead in the ocean. He's not, he's escaped again. So, the innkeepers who have Cosette, in the book, they have 3 children, 2 girls and a boy. They hate the boy. They look after the girls like angels. In the film, they only have 1 child, and it's a girl. But in both, we do see the horror, the true horror of the innkeepers and the neglect that they've heaped upon Cosette. And when Cosette is sent to fetch water at night in the woods, middle of the night, woods freezing cold, this is where Valjean basically becomes her rescuer. So in the book, he looks like a beggar slightly and takes a room at the inn and then ends up rescuing Cosette. In the film, he declines to stay and looks like a gentleman. However, in both, he bargains with the innkeepers till he is paid quite a lot of money, so now he is in charge of Cosette. Now, in the book, he whisks Cosette off to a place he set up before. They live in a poor estate as well, but both bringing love into each other's lives. And the book covers a wider range of time as well. In the film, they go into the next point, and Javert is already on his trail, and they just about escape. As I said, the film is moving a lot quicker with events, which makes sense because a 1,200 odd page book, 3-hour film, they cut so much out. So we get Javert back on his trail in the book, but as mentioned before, longer time has passed before Javert is back on his trail. And in both, Valjean still manages to escape with Cosette. Now, in the film, the next time we see Cosette and Valjean, she's a young lady. In the book, however, he seeks shelter in the garden of a church after escaping Javert, where he meets the old man he rescued while he was Monsieur le Maire, who then basically looks after both Valjean and Cosette. Now, we get the full history of the church that they're hiding in the garden of. Again, we don't need that. So in the film, we've jumped several years. In the book, we follow Cosette and Valjean a lot closer as they seek shelter. They try to stay safe, and the time passes. So the gentleman that Valjean helped smuggle Valjean out in a coffin to then come back in so he could enter the church legally, basically, and get a job there. So Valjean ends up working alongside this gentleman as his brother and assistant gardener, and Cosette gets taken into the schooling of the church, and all this happens just in the book, not in the film. And in the book, we get a little interlude about the urchins of Paris and the state of poverty. Again, we see it in the film. We don't necessarily need to read about it in the book. It's very long. Now, in the film, as many years have passed, we now come across Marius and the beginnings of a revolution, another revolution. In both, the innkeepers and their 3 children in the book, 1 child in the film, are now destitute and living nearer Paris. Now, in the book, we get a lot more information about a gentleman called Monsieur Gillenormand. Again, probably said his name wrong, and how he lived his life. And this is because he is Marius's grandfather. We see him briefly in the film. We get a lot of information about him in the book. Now, in the book, we learn how Marius was kept from his father, and only after his dad had died did he truly understand how much he was loved, and this causes Marius to start changing his ideals and his views towards the world. In the film, we only really see Marius and his friends discussing a revolution. We never learn what pushes him there, considering that he comes from middle to upper class society, and he does come from money. In fact, in the film, he still seems on good terms with his grandfather, but in the book, his grandfather has kicked him out because of his opposing views. In both, however, we do see the small group of men wanting to spark a revolution. It takes a lot more time in the book than it does in the film. So in the book, he becomes penniless and destitute, and he has no shoes and everything like that. In the film, he always seems to have some form of money. So in the book, when Marius first sees Cosette and Valjean, he does not think much of her. He thinks they're very plain, and then after 6 months, he starts to fall for her. Because she becomes a beauty. And then once their eyes meet, something passes between them. Oh, true love. So Marius goes back out every day just to sit and observe her and see her, basically. In the film, it's the first time they lay eyes on each other that they fall for each other. So they only ever, so straight away they know that they love each other. And so Marius tries to find out everything about her. So he sets the innkeeper's daughter, who fancies him and he's very unaware of, to find out who she is, where she comes from, and everything like that. However, in the book, it's quite obvious. So Valjean picks up on Marius's infatuation. In the film, he doesn't learn of this so much later, but because Valjean picks up on Marius's infatuation, he then sort of whisks Cosette away. So in both, Marius finds out where Cosette lives. However, in the book, she's spirited away before they can even properly talk. And in the book, she's spirited away as well because of Marius paying attention to Cosette, and the fact that he has followed her to hit their house. And in the book, as he's spying on the neighbours, the innkeeper's going as Jondrette. So the neighbours going as Jondrette is actually the innkeepers. And so basically, Cosette and Valjean appear to them as philanthropists. When he finds out that it's actually Valjean, he then gets this plot in his head to capture him and extort him for money. So Jondrette, the innkeeper, asks his elder daughter to find out where Cosette lives. Now, in both, Valjean is going to the aid of the innkeeper, who doesn't yet recognise him, and, he doesn't recognise the innkeeper till it's too late. This causes him once again to flee, because in both they've set a trap, and it's a lot more elaborate in the book. But in both, this causes Javert's attention to it, and he swoops in time to capture the criminals. Then he goes to get a statement from the victim, Valjean, and Valjean has disappeared off the face of the earth. So this causes the entire family of the innkeepers to end up in prison in the book. In the film, we just assume the innkeeper and his wife end up in prison. We don't really see it, and we only see them reappear right at the end of the film. Now, in the book, we get another interlude. This is about the history of revolutions within France in the early 1800s and the 1830s. This is building up to a revolution that is shown in the film as well, and we start to see the next generation on course for their own revolution. So in both, Epine, which is the innkeeper's eldest, finds out where Cosette lives and brings Marius to her. So earlier in the book, we learn of Marius and how he pined after Cosette after they met. Now we get it from Cosette's side as well in the book. So we see a lot more of that interaction in both Marius's point of view and Cosette's point of view. And we finally get the two of them meeting. And in both, they learn each other's name. In the film, as soon as they meet, the innkeeper tries to set the trap. In the book, it's a lot later and running and hiding. It's a lot more elaborate. Now, in the book, we get more about other characters, like the innkeeper's other children, plus a little urchin called Gavroche, who's like the little cockney one from the film. And in the book, he is the innkeeper's youngest son. Well, third child, because they have another two children that they sell off. Don't know, don't ask. So in the book, as well as the male the male innkeeper escapes from prison with the help of Gavroche, who is the innkeeper's son. And we see in the book as well the blossoming of love between Cosette and Marius, where, as I mentioned in the film, you get a brief moment between them, a kiss, and then she's gone. So in both, Epine seems to have strong feelings towards Marius, who he is he does not notice. So she stops her dad from breaking into Cosette's house. And this, basically saves Cosette. In the film, Marius is involved with the revolution a lot more quicker than he is in the book. In the book, it takes him a bit of time to get there. However, in the book, when Cosette is to leave, he goes to his grandfather to ask for money to be able to marry her. The grandfather misunderstands and ends up insulting Cosette, thinking she's a common woman of the night, and telling Marius to make her mistress instead. This causes Marius to leave again and not look back. So when he realises in the book that he cannot go with Cosette, his comrades pull him into the revolution. However, he seems to go missing for a while. In the film, he goes back to the revolution with his comrades straight away. As mentioned before, the revolution is bigger in the film. So we get a little interlude comparing war to revolts and revolutions to riots. Again, it's not really needed. So the spark for the barricades to go up and a revolt to happen is the funeral of General Lamarck, which causes such a huge battle between the common man and the army. This is because General Lamarck was a man of the people and they respected him. In the book, we get descriptions of all the barricades and all the clashes between men and the army. In the film, we only see the revolution and one barricade, and that is where Marius has set his barricade at. Now, we also get a hint in the book about that Epine has dressed as a boy to fight on the barricades. In the film, it's obvious that this is what's happened, because we see it happen. So in the book, we get another of the lovely interludes about the history of Corinth, which is like a pub or something, from its foundation, from it slowly being built up, and then it works towards the revolution. Not needed again, there was no need for it. And as in both, that is where the barricade is built and manned. Now in both at the barricade, Javert has tried to slip in amongst the revolutionaries, but is outed and captured and restrained. Marius in the book has now fully joined the revolution, and in both, Epine gives her life to save Marius. As Epony dies, again, I'm 99% sure I'm saying her name wrong. I don't care. So as Epony dies, she gives Marius a letter that was sent by Cosette telling him where she was. Marius, knowing that he cannot leave his comrades, sends a letter back as a farewell to Cosette, and tries to save Gavroche by sending him out with the letter, hoping he won't make it back in time to die, basically. The farewell letter ends up in Valjean's hands instead, so he goes out to the barricade to save Marius. Now, in the book, we get another brief interlude about the other barricades, which in the film we never hear about. When Valjean arrives back at the barricade, he sees Javert and recognises Javert. And in both, the little urchin Gavroche is slain as he exits the barricade to try and get more ammunition from the dead. Valjean asks if he can deal with Javert. He pretends to kill him, but instead lets him escape, and this happens in both. In both, the final battle at the barricade has begun. Everyone who mans it is prepared to die, and in fact does. Apart from Marius, who is wounded and is rescued by Valjean, they escape via the sewers, which is where we get another one of our lovely little interludes about the pirate sewer system. Yeah, baby! What fun! So Valjean is helping get the unconscious Marius out through the sewers, and in both he comes across the male innkeeper who offers him help in the book, but tries to rob them in the film. But in both, as Valjean is saving Marius, they're confronted by Javert. So they get out. The male innkeeper has taken a bit of proof that he's seen this gentleman in the sewer. As they're escaping, they're confronted by Javert. In the film, he just lets them go, and get Valjean back. Lets Valjean escape and gets Marius back to his grandfather. In the book, Javert actively drives Valjean back to the house so he can give Marius back to his grandfather, and so that he can say goodbye to Cosette. But here, Javert leaves Valjean alone and disappears. This act, however, in both pushes Javert to commit suicide because he's had such a strong case of right and wrong in him, and he's been searching for Valjean for years. So for Valjean to have saved his life once and to have let him go again, this throws everything he thought he knew out the window, and so he dies. He kills himself. When Marius recovers, he and Cosette end up getting married, and his grandfather is firmly behind the union. In the book, Valjean is still around for quite a time after this. In the film, he is left to hide in a church as he does not want Cosette to find out who he really is once he brought Marius and Cosette together. However, in both, he lets Marius know all about his past. Now, in the book, Valjean keeps visiting Cosette every night, but slowly Marius pushes the two apart. In the film, we don't really see this. Now, the innkeeper comes by Marius and tries to get money as he claims that Valjean is a murderer and killed a man. Obviously, this then proves that Valjean is the man that saved Marius's life. So in the book, Marius pays the innkeeper money to get rid of him because the innkeeper also saved his dad at the Battle of Waterloo. And this also occurs very long after the wedding. In the film, he gets them both kicked out of the wedding. But in both, this then causes Marius to take Cosette and see Valjean one last time. And as he sadly passes away, they're still there to say goodbye. So the film ends with the characters who have passed singing on a barricade, and in classic style of this book, we get our final interlude, so to speak, and it gives us information about convents, monasteries, religion, and the book ends with information about Argot, I don't know. So for the main story, it is actually quite close to what the film produced. Within the game of cat and mouse between Javert and Valjean, the way that all the characters kind of interlude with each other and interact with each other. However, there is a lot of interludes in the book that they cannot include in the film, and a large part of Marius and Cosette's childhoods are missed, and I completely understand why, but it does get a 4 out of 5 for plot adaptation. Now, this is my own opinion, of course. If you agree or disagree with anything that I say, please leave it below in the comments. Don't forget to click subscribe so you're alerted whenever new videos come out. Thank you so much for your continued support, and remember to always keep it contento.